everybody, we are here. Hope you all had a Merry Christmas. I definitely did, which is why I was not able to get to reviewing these three movies until now. And so I decided just to play catch up, and as a nice way to wrap up the year, let's just do a triple header. Let's just review these big three that came out all relatively in the same week. Just cap things off nicely there. So we're gonna go down into the ocean to the one other person who was slightly entertaining in Justice League. Yes, talking about Aquaman here. A lot of people have been very enthusiastic about this movie, and I am definitely not. Unlike Justice League, I have absolutely no intention of micturating upon their good times because, you know what? It's passable. It's an enjoyable little film. It's a trifle. Walking into Aquaman, I was warned in advance, look at it as if it were a Saturday morning cartoon. And with that mindset, you walk in, and yes, it is exactly that. It is pretty much a bog standard Saturday morning cartoon in its most base form. The story is pretty much as base as a Saturday morning cartoon. The villains are base like a Saturday morning cartoon. This thing is pretty much there for full entertainment. Just simple, unashamed entertainment. And the fact that it has no shame about it is definitely a plus in its favor. Now, contrary to what you may think, I am not a DC cynic. In fact, if you remember, one of my earliest reviews was Wonder Woman, and I gave it a very shining review. It's just the fact that DC has not had a consistent level of quality. Well, the one thing I can happily say in Aquaman's favor is that it definitely does not have the problems with a lot of the lesser DC movies. It's definitely not as tone-deaf as Man of Steel. It's not as sloppy as Suicide Squad. It's definitely not as incomprehensible as Batman vs. Superman. And it's definitely not as schizophrenic as Justice League. Far from it. This film has a consistent tone all throughout. It definitely knows what kind of film it is. And the best part is it definitely feels like a movie. So these are a lot of things it has going for it. But it is not the superior film that everyone's making it out to be. I think some people are just so stoked by the notion of the fact that DC finally did another one right that they're willing to accept it as a masterpiece compared to all the other entries in DC. So I have a feeling that in time the rose-colored glasses are going to fade away and they're going to look at it like going, oh. I don't really have much of a desire to rain on this parade because also another fact, this is Aquaman. Anything they do with Aquaman is going to be something of an improvement because prior to Jason Momoa getting cast in this role, he was basically a Nazi poster boy of the sea. And, well, funny enough, Patrick Wilson in this movie kind of looks like what Aquaman should have looked like. And in turn played a Nazi poster boy of the sea. So really anything they do with Aquaman in this movie was going to naturally be an improvement. DC has been trying desperately to carve its niche against Marvel because Marvel has had a consistent level of quality. Hell, to the point where one of its entries is being actively campaigned for Best Picture nominations. It's already got a Best Picture nomination at the Golden Globes. DC's been trying to keep up with it, and if they think they're going to do it by just, you know, playing in the sandbox with the other kiddies, it's not going to achieve that goal. You can go around saying that their whole intention was just to be a basic superhero movie, but that's been my problem with the DC movies since Man of Steel. They are pretty much content to be just that, and it is driving me crazy because when you look at what they're doing with the Arrowverse, what they have done in the past, trying to make them a bit more meaningful, actually trying to give them a bit more weight, and then you got the movies on a bigger budget, and they're just more than happy to be silly fun. At least Wonder Woman was trying to be something a lot bigger than it was, even though it did tend to veer into superhero territory. And that's really a shame. Watching this one, I was going, yeah, my comparison to Black Panther is pretty much appropriate, but there was even stuff that this movie had that was done better in Ant-Man and the Wasp. And I feel like there were ways you could have taken it that could have made them new and special. I'm going to be nice and dodge spoilers, so I'm not going to get too deep into it. I will say the action didn't really blow my mind, and I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that this one was extremely CGI'd. I mean, granted, a lot of Marvel stuff is heavily CGI'd, but there was always a sense that there was still some kind of stunt work done, that there was some kind of practical work done. And to Aquaman's credit, a lot of the scenes you can definitely tell were done on set, so there was a lot of credit there. But I think those are the ones that worked for me. The ones that didn't really work so much were the bigger scenes, like the final battle. The Saturday morning cartoons are entertaining, but I was never blown away by the action. I think this movie deliberately dumbed itself down to lower everyone's expectations, and so that way when they see this movie and see that it's actually slightly better than what people thought it was going to be. And that's just a damn shame. I'm going round and round, but honestly, that's my major problem with this movie, is that I feel like it's spending way too much time lowering itself because it's an Aquaman movie, when I feel like there could have been so much more done with it. And funny enough, I think it all could have come down to the villain of the piece, Orm, played by Patrick Wilson. Everyone else is talking about Black Manta, but I'm looking at Black Manta going, he's kind of extraneous to the plot. And he's supposed to be Aquaman's flagship villain. I'm like going, no, you don't put him in the background and just sequel bait him. You could have written around it and done something different with it and saved this villain for some other spot that's a bit more meaningful. But Black Manta, in my estimation, was pretty much wasted. And all the time that was spent on Black Manta, they could have spent on fleshing out King Orm as a villain. And that's really a shame, because you have Arthur Curry, Aquaman, who is very timid to go to Atlantis, and frankly is not particularly fond of it because of his relationship with his mother. Meanwhile, you've got King Orm, who has nothing but contempt for the surface world because of, let's face it, we're assholes. And I felt like this is a really strong juxtaposition where you could build something strong and meaningful here. You could build an entire story around the idea of people building up hate of things that they don't know and understand. And we could go on this heroic odyssey where Arthur decides to go to Atlantis and finally decides to learn about the culture and be a king of both worlds as he is prophesied to be. And then you have King Orm, who he himself, doesn't know anything about the surface world, but because of his hatred and because of his ingrained prejudice, he refuses to grow. There's a really good scene with Mira where she actually sees the surface world for the first time, is actually enchanted by it. And I'm like, this could have been the core of the movie, but they squander it. I could spend some time talking about the performances, but honestly, even the performances were what you'd expect. None of them really blew my mind. Momoa was capable. Everyone was capable. The movie is, I'd say the best term is aquadequate. Like adequate, but with aqua. So aquadequate. That's the best I can really do with Aquaman. It's bog standard, it's entertaining, definitely a considerable step up from DC's other efforts, but in the end, it's not gonna give me any incentive to give it more than... Speaking of another movie that also pretty much does the same thing, Mary Poppins Returns, Guinness, I believe it just won the Guinness record for longest gap between sequel. In that it does continue the story of Jane and Michael Banks. It has a really strong start where you find out that Michael was an aspiring artist, but he was also taking up the family business. But his wife dies, leaving him in something of a distraught state. His house is in disarray. He ends up on the verge of almost losing it. And in an almost serendipitous fashion, Mary Poppins arrives again, and merriment ensues. I'm going to get the goods out of the way because there is a lot of good in here. First off, it is a gorgeous production. The musical numbers are incredibly staged by Rob Marshall. It's also filmed just as well. A lot of the songs, some people said it weren't as memorable. I actually thought a lot of them were. I got a real kick about the songs, and I probably will buy the soundtrack. And of course, it's all sung and conveyed and performed by an outstanding cast. Emily Blunt is a wonderful Mary Poppins. We've had this recent spate of actors stepping in for roles that were made famous by other actors. And the best performances that you can ever get out of them are when they decide to not try to imitate what the other one did. I mean, of course, a great example was Tom Hardy when he played Mad Max. In this case, we have Emily Blunt stepping in for Mary Poppins, and never once was I going, Julie Andrews did it better. I really liked what Emily Blunt was doing, and it still felt like Mary Poppins. It was still practically perfect in every way. Her singing was top-notch, her demeanor was right on the money, and she brought this sense of wonder that is what you would expect from the character. And Lin-Manuel-Miranda plays a new character, Jack, who, you can basically say he's the Bert character, but because he is a different character, a lamplighter, he has something of a history with the Banks family. They've known each other since, they were kids. And so that lends to a very sweet little romantic subplot, but not one that derails the entire movie, just a nice little thing on the side. And Lin-Manuel Miranda, what more can be said about the man? The man is Mr. Show Business right now, and he brings all of it to the screen here. He is so much fun. And him, along with Emily Blunt, add for a great on-screen duo. And the best part is, it's not one where... I always suspected Bert always had a thing for Mary Poppins. His camaraderie with her as more of a partners in crime, partners in mischief kind of thing. And that's what I got out of it. Now, despite the fact this film does have something of a different foundation for its story compared to the first one, it still has the familiar beats of the first one. Me and Lynn were actually kind of predicting beat for beat for beat of how it echoed the first movie, and I think that's where the major fault in this movie lies, is the fact that there's no real surprises when it comes to where the story goes from here. It's all pretty much resolves in all the ways you'd expect. But whereas Aquaman does all the familiar story beats of a superhero movie and it hurt the film, but it seems here that the filmmakers want to make a film that honors the original film, just to show that modern filmmaking can bring back a lot of the feelings that you had from way back when. And it seems a bit hypocritical, particularly since I just bashed Aquaman for this, but honestly, there was just something that worked better about the way they rehashed things here in Mary Poppins Returns that became something of an endearment to me. I'm definitely not going to say this is by any shape, way, or form a superior sequel. In fact, I'm not even going to say this was a necessary sequel. In fact, I'd say Mary Poppins Returns has something to go hand in hand with Solo, in the sense that we never asked for this film, but we can tell that a lot of work and a lot of passion was put into making it, and because the work shows, you feel like you're happy to have it anyway. And you do get a great package for it. You get some wonderful songs, incredible performances from a spectacular ensemble cast, not just our core leads, but you also get great appearances from Meryl Streep has a very memorable character, and even some cameos from some Disney alumni, which I will not spoil because I will say those are the moments that actually got me and Lynn choked up. So I would urge you, if you really enjoyed the original Mary Poppins, and if you want a nice chunk of nostalgia, and if you want to see modern day filmmaking recreate the styles of old, I'd say give this one a go, in particular, if you just want some light, fluffy entertainment. But Mary Poppins Returns won't really change your life, and it won't make you go, oh my god, that was way better than the original, but it's still something worth seeing, and it's still something worth enjoying. So I'm going to give it a Transformers by the Bay, waste of time. Whereas this one, not so much. Bumblebee. Wow. How incredible a difference a change of director makes. Bumblebee was directed by Travis Knight, who had a background in animation, specifically working with Studio Leica on the incredible Kubo and the Two Strings. I'm always staggered when an animation director makes the crossover into live action and they bring out something astounding like I didn't expect. Of course, a good example was Brad Bird when he directed Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. This one is right up there. And even more so, this is him bringing a franchise which earlier this year ran itself into the ground with Transformers Last Night and just blew this one out of proportion and brought this franchise to an area that you get a feeling that Spielberg tried to bring the franchise to with the original film, and he made Bumblebee a film that you could easily slot in the same place as E.T. and The Iron Giant. Matter of fact, one could even say it's a hybrid of the two. It's sweet-natured, it's fun, it's a very warm film, and the action is just that right amount of spectacular. And the film never loses focus on the kind of story it wants to tell. And even better, it seems like they wanted to bring out the few things that were really good in that original Transformers movie and just try to focus entirely on that. I did enjoy the original Transformers film, and a lot of it was, and I realized a lot of it was because I liked just the core story of a boy in his car. And then it does kind of get blown out of proportion when we get to Sector 7, and then we get that big battle at the end of the movie, and pretty much that's when Bay starts jerking off. And that's when the movie kind of gets a little crazy. Major problem everyone's always had with Michael Bay Transformers movies is that when it gets to the big battle sequences, it is really difficult because of the designs. It's really hard to figure out which Transformers which one's the Autobots, which are the Decepticons. We've always had that problem. Not here. Not here in Bumblebee. In fact, the action sequences are smooth and very clean. There's some excellent tracking shots. I'd say there's one that's in the trailer of Charlie, Haley Steinfeld, running from a brawl between Bumblebee and one of the Decepticons, and it's an incredible shot. It's very flowing, and you never lose focus on her running from the battle, and you never lose focus on them in the background doing the fight. So it's excellently staged. But speaking of action sequences, for you G1 Transformers fans, you are gonna have a blast. And I'm not just talking about the fangasming first 3 minutes of the film where you see the war on Cybertron and you're seeing a whole load of Autobots and Decepticons all done G1 style. They are unmistakable. They look like the way you remember them, and they look gorgeous for it. So you're going to have a good time. But even then, littered throughout the movie, you're going to get a whole bunch of great references that never feel fan wanky. It never feels forced. Everything about this film just feels a lot smoother, a lot more genuine. The characters are less cartoony and more fleshed out. Haley Steinfeld owns the movie, and even then, never distracts from the core character. Her relationship with Bumblebee is definitely right up there with Hogarth and the Iron Giant, with Elliot and E.T. It is beautifully done. Meanwhile, you've also got John Cena, who, yeah, you could say he plays the stereotypical military character who comes around at the very end. This is not a spoiler, you're going to predict it, and I guess that is the major con of the movie, because, yeah, again, predictable plot. But this one at least still keeps its focus on the character story as opposed to the major plot as a whole. And John Cena, I've actually never really watched him in a film before prior to this point, but I guess is a good one to start with. And I will say there was a great moment where he's kind of trying to call out the Decepticons bullshit, and I'm not going to spoil the scene, but it is a hilarious scene because we're all going like, Decepticons! The only real con I can think about this movie is that, again, story beats are familiar, but I think the thing that makes this one feel so fresh is that the relationship between Charlie and Bumblebee, keeping it to that core and making it such an endearing relationship, definitely makes the film work. And I suppose another con that's, I guess, a bit petty is the fact that, unfortunately, this film ties into the franchise of Michael Bay, and it's not a reboot, it's a prequel. And I'm like, oh, come on, we're good with this reboot. You can feel free, go ahead, reboot away. We're good with rebooting this one. We don't need to tie into Sam Witwicky and his mother asking him if he masturbates. We don't need that anymore. We're good with this. Just keep it to this. I honestly would have enjoyed the continuing adventures of Charlie and Bumblebee. It would have been fine. Not only is it going to get an Narcotic Casserole rating of... I was waiting to find out whether or not I was going to give this to Peter Rabbit originally, but honestly, I'm going to give Bumblebee the coveted Narcotic Casserole trophy of biggest surprise of the year. So, those are my year-end closeout reviews. If you agree, disagree, I know I could have gotten into a bit more detail, but I had to get through 3 reviews here. And also, I wanted to cap off with some final words for 2018. This has been something of a chaotic year between me doing the Orlando Fringe Festival, doing Shakespeare's Ghostbusters, and I'm even doing it again for the Winter Fringe. Following that up with Shakespeare's Terminator the Second for, yeah, you heard me right, Shakespeare's Terminator the Second for the Fringe Festival next year. And then, in the midst of it, all the madness that's been going on in the world, and me just doing what I can on this channel to just try and entertain y'all and have a great time. And I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I'll try my best to do some Oscar coverage. Unfortunately, the death of MoviePass has forbidden me from going out and seeing as many Oscar bait movies as I'd like. I'm going to try and get out to see a couple, though, just so I at least have an opinion on something come Oscar time. But if you've been enjoying all the stuff that we've been doing for Narcotic Casserole, definitely leave it on in the comments below. Definitely subscribe. We're going to get a lot more coming soon. I actually just recorded 3 more episodes of Rare Delicacies, which will be coming out sporadically throughout January and February. I'm going to be doing a crossover with That Miss Quinn for our next edition of the Cinema Schlock Society. It's going to serve as something of a prologue to our year of that show. And I might finally pull the trigger on giving the Cinema Doctor his own show, because originally, when I started this channel, he was supposed to be the flagship character, but as things evolved, the founder ended up taking the reins. So hopefully all these announcements will excite the living hell out of you. They kind of excite me too. So can't think of anything more to say. It's been a crazy year. I hope your year has been great. I hope your Christmas has been great. So I guess see you next year.